What's going on? So, I'm here to discuss some unfortunate realities of being a part of Watchtower's corporation or their organization. Now, these realities are pertinent and poignant for all of us that have exited the group or and those whom are still in the group. This information is extremely relevant for opposing groups. When I say opposing, groups that are not directly like Watchtower, but similar. Things like groups like Mormons, 2x2s, things along that sort. Sungjung Chi, Worldwide Church of God. If you all are watching, I want you to pay very close attention to this information. And I normally don't recommend getting notes, notepads, but you should really pay attention because I feel in my heart it's going to be impactful because it's coming from a genuine place. Now, I'm not going to, outline what we're going to talk about. So I'll leave it up with a little bit of suspicion to pique your interest out of love, because the best introduction that I can give on this topic is authenticity and letting you know that it will be worth your time. Now, I was at the gym earlier when all of these thoughts entered my mind, and I was moved to discuss this. And the reality of being a part of Watchtower is that it will do a lot of stuff to your mind, to your psychology, to your perspective on life. And some of the stuff is actually good perspectives, but a lot of it is bad if you're not able to harness your mind and redefine your identity. And that's difficult because often people were never able to fully embark upon who they truly are at the core. So when somebody writes on a clean slate, so to speak, and says, this is who you are, and your brain is formed, when you think about your prefrontal cortex and your hippocampus and your amygdala, and it's formed during some of your primitive years and some of your most sensitive years, which creates this pivotal concepts in your mind that are subconscious that you're not even realizing that you're running on a paradigm that you can't change. It's like you being an inanimate object, like a thermostat. The thermostat, let's say, is very cold in the room, but it's at 62. The thermostat in itself can't do anything about that. It's programmed, but somebody with consciousness to feel the temperature in the room can change the thermostat. But that's kind of what happens in one's mind. It's like you're living this false identity and you're programmed to expect things like you being the only true religion. Everybody else is worldly. You have all these paradigms in your mind, but you never train yourself to look outside of it so that they can be reprogrammed, because you only looked at Watchtower as the programmer that is claiming to represent God, but the stuff that they're telling you, a lot of it is nowhere in the Bible. So you weren't trained to see the nuances between the dangers when independent thinking is good for you and when independent thinking is bad. Independent thinking goes back to your free will, and you're supposed to make sure it aligns with God's concepts, but you have to test those concepts, because someone can say that it's coming from God and it still not be. And they can genuinely do this or maliciously do it. So this is why it's important, because when you think about trauma and crisis, I was doing a training a few weeks ago. I had to complete all these trainings to work with a certain population in a program called Jworg, where it's basically at-risk youth. And they all have a diagnosis, but they also experience trauma. It could be something as simple as them losing their keys. They'll have an emotional response in a different way. And there's no voice of reason at that point, because their prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus is so accustomed to trauma, you can't reason with somebody in that state because they come from a very, I guess I would say, not the best background. And that's all they know is chaos. So likewise, when somebody is experiencing trauma from waking up to certain realities and they're programmed to think about fear and death all the time. You can come with facts and reason. They're not really listening to you because they've been programmed to activate fear. I'm going to die. I'm going to lose my family. All of this emotional stuff. So this awareness is understanding that their brain, they have been dumbed down, and in a sense, people are becoming dumber. So a lot of people's potentials are being robbed. You have to think about axons and neurons. When those synapses form, especially during those primitive years, the amount of neuron synapses, which means your brain can fire faster with thought processes, they're not using it. So they're not going to be as smart as they're capable of. So it does. And this is one reason why some people aren't developing their analytical skills, because it's been robbed of them. Now, some people are very bright. It doesn't matter what type of indoctrination you give them. They're going to be able to see right through it. And then once they are fully out of a certain environment, that milieu, that negative milieu, what'll happen, their critical thinking will fully form. And even if they did have some brain cells that died. So that's a topic for another day. But what I want to say is this. Just because you have a hope doesn't mean that it's real. And we need to be aware of not saying something can't be a hope simply because we can't provide substantial facts on it. May I remind everyone that a few hundred years ago, we didn't have heart surgeries. We didn't have certain procedures. So people that had certain heart conditions didn't have hope. Not because there wasn't a reality of hope possible, the potentiality of it, but because we hadn't discovered it. So the proof was there. We just didn't have the consciousness to realize the proof. So likewise, when it comes down to faith and beliefs on certain matters, when you're thinking about atheists and things along that sort, just because you can't prove something with substantial facts all the time doesn't mean that it's not true. But here's where we get in trouble with spiritualistic and spiritual beliefs and religion, where we have this gold standard, whether it be the Bible, the Quran, whatever we're using to form our belief system. Then we have to step outside of the 5 major religions and then ask where all of this stuff came from as well. We have to always have that self-awareness to put a paradigm within our mind to undo paradigms. What that simply means is knowing how to put a filtering system to separate facts from truth and to say what you don't know. We always have to lead with what we don't know in order to identify truths, because what you're doing is you're getting rid of biases by doing it like that, and also having an open mind. What occurred to me at the gym earlier is I realized that all of us have been guilty of asking open-ended questions subconsciously, but actually expecting a closed-ended answer. For example, what do you like to do for fun? And then somebody has in their mind, they want the person to say, oh, I just like to go out and preach. But really the person doesn't realize they asked an open-ended question. So the person gives an open-ended answer, but they were actually expecting a closed-ended answer. And I'm going to talk about this more, and vice versa. Sometimes people ask closed-ended questions like yes or no, but subconsciously they're expecting a open-ended answer. Like, for example, do you know that exercise beneficial for you? There will be yes or no. But the person has in their mind, for example, 1 Timothy 4:8, physical training is beneficial for a little. They want you to say, well, yes, but we have to focus on spirituality. And I say that to say this: if you pay close attention when you're talking with former Watchtower members or just people in general, people don't realize that they have arrived at a conclusion that they didn't inform you about. So when you have rehearse answers in your mind, for example, like at the Theocratic Ministry School or the CLM, they're forming these skits that's not based on objective reality. So they're expecting the person to respond a certain way. So what they've done, they've created a open-ended question while subconsciously expecting a closed-ended answer. If the question is open-ended, you need to expect an open-ended answer. Or vice versa. If the question is closed-ended, you need to expect a closed-ended answer. As a good example would be, When you look at crime and war, does this not get your attention? Aren't you tired of all of this? The person is going to say, yes, of course. But really, the person is also looking for you to attach this to a narrative that they may have in their mind associated with the last days and identifying truth. But truth that they've come up with that's subjective, that's not actually what the thing is saying objectively. So be mindful of making sure that an open-ended question where you consciously are looking for an open-ended answer, where you're not trying to control the person. And when a person tells you their open-ended answer, then you're already saying it is incorrect. It's not incorrect. You ask the person what their view was. So when you pay close attention, that's one of the main things I've noticed. That is why it's hard to reason with certain people, because they don't realize that they're asking you an open-ended question, but they already have a prescribed closed-ended answer in their mind. And that doesn't match. It doesn't make any sense. So that in itself is unreasonable. So we have to snap out of that and see that for what it is. That's a dichotomy between the subconscious and the conscious. And until those things unite, the person will always experience cognitive dissonance, which leads to cognitive distortions, where the person constantly goes in to a given situation with a memory that has never happened. That's why people can say, you always do this. But if the person is being objective, they will have to say, okay, you have done this 500 times, but of that 500, how many have you not done it or whatever? Let's say that is 300 to 200. So they haven't done it. Every time they go to the restroom, they don't always leave the toilet seat up. They leave it up 300 times compared to 200, but give them credit for the 200. So what that makes you begin to reason, you may say, okay, you do this 55, 60% of the time, but then you give them credit for the other one. So you have hope. But when you say this 100% of the time, that changes up your perspective, and you view it in an absolute manner, which then unites your emotions in a negative way. You think there is no hope because we're not listening. We'll shut down our minds. So that's why Jesus said, let he who has ears listen. So now it's time for us all to listen to one another. JW's on here. I don't need to hide behind anything I'm saying, because I know what I'm saying is true. And that's another thing we have to focus on, the difference between knowing and believing. You see, when we know something, beliefs start off as beliefs and then they go to a point of knowing. That can be dangerous when you begin to know something that you haven't substantiated. Somebody say, I know what I'm talking about, but they never objectively analyze their beliefs. So the person has to realize what objectivity is. As an example, I have a book, and let's say Just Get Up and Manifest Your Inner Genius. Now that book is almost 300 pages. So let's say that I give somebody the Cliff Notes. I give you a paragraph summary of 1 page on each chapter. And I say, read this, but you can't read the whole book. And the person buys the book, then I'm trying to control them. No, you can't read the whole book. Only read these chapters. Only read the summary. So the summaries, I'm talking up my own book. So of course they're going to think it's great, but that's not objective, because if there are 300 pages, why would I give this person a 1-page summary and I'm not letting them form their own opinion? And that's what the organization does to people. That's what it does with the Bible. It'll say, here, read this, read this, read this, and this is what it is. But then when you try to say, okay, you're giving me the snippets of your history. As an example, if you have literature from 1879 all the way through 2025, don't call something old light and new light, this and that, and something that's old, new today is going to be old 2 weeks from now. If I am doing objective research, you don't need to show me a video of how the brothers do the research. When I am investigating something, it's like somebody saying they did the research for your partner, but you never got to know them. They went out on dates with them. They got to know them, but I'm the one who have to live with them. I still need to do that myself. You may have missed something. You can't say you did the research for me and say, here it is. That's not how you do a peer review. So if you have information available with I need to see it all so I can verify whether or not this is true. And if you have nothing to hide, you would do that. If it's me that has to make this investment in your organization, I need full access to everything. And that's how you see that manipulation. And then some people have the audacity to write bad reviews. The person imagine me as an author. I start a page where I post bad reviews on everybody that refused to buy my book, or everybody that bought my book, but they refused to follow my mandatory suggestion of not reading the whole book. And I say, I told these people it's 300 pages, but I only want them to read one page. But keep in mind, they don't want to spend their hard-earned money. But then I start calling them names. Don't see, these are the kind of people that shouldn't buy my books if you're not going to listen to it. These are bad people. They're similar to calling people apostates, where these people are investing their time and energy, their experiences, but you're saying they can't tell their truth or the real truth on what they experience. You're taking away people's autonomy and free will. If God himself allowed himself to be criticized, whether it was factual or not, he didn't hide from any of that. That's why he gave people a brain. See, this is how you know that's not coming from God, because God himself allows Satan to challenge him. With Job, tempting Jesus in the Garden of Eden, all that criticism. Satan said, is it really so? He said, if you remove this hedge from around Job, he will curse you to your very face. In Job chapter 2. So here's the point. Here's the message. Either you're following the Bible or you're not. It is time to stop this nonsense. It is time for people to stop not using your brain. It is time for you to analyze your motives for what you claim to be truth. When truth is measurable. And truth that has not been discovered is not measurable in reality. It just hasn't been discovered yet. You see, here's what you need to understand. There's a difference between facts, what's true, and truth. And I've mentioned this before. You see, truth is omnipresent. Truth is truth in the past. It'll be truth presently and in the future. You see, but a fact can change. What's true can also change. For example, milk or your birthday. Let's say that you're 20 years old right now. That's a fact. Next year, there will not be a fact. It's not a lie, though. The truth of the matter is, truth, is that you were going to continue to age. That never changed. But an element of the truth, which is the actual age, you had to adjust that with your thinking because it was a fact. But it was always a fact that your age would change. But if you keep saying that's a fact today, tomorrow, next year, it won't be a fact anymore. You have to say it is a fact that I am no longer 20, I'm now 21. But once you keep saying it's a fact that I'm 20 and now you're 21, it's just a lie. So when it comes down to understanding facts, a fact is always dual. It has an element to it where it's going to be true and false, depending on how you use it. And then there's also some facts that can only be true. As an example, it's a fact that we need water to survive. That will never not be true. See, what I realize is that sometimes people are using dualism on something that should be absolute. For example, this person is not able to isolate the difference between needing water versus how much water you need. Those are two different facts. It's a fact that you need water to survive. Now, it's also a fact that it depends on how much you work out, stuff like that, regarding how much you need. To tell everybody that they need 8 glasses of water a day, when some people may need more than that. They may work out more. Somebody that's sedentary versus somebody that runs 20 miles a week or 30 miles a day, whatever, they're going to need way more water. So you see the difference? You see how we have to isolate those facts? They both are facts, but if we misuse them, we've given a person a lie. So know the difference between dualism with facts, when a fact is going to be true and false at the same time, depending on how you use it, and then the absolute fact. The water, needing it, that's an absolute fact. There's no dualism to it. That's a monolithic concept. How much we need is going to be factual all at the same time and not false, depending on how you use it. So real truth is omnipresent. It never changes. And this is what you need to understand about God. James 1:17, Malachi 3:6. God can never lie. God can never lie. So if the organization has history of lying about several things, it did not come from God. That all lies originates with a spirit of deception, which is of Satan. There is no ambiguity to that. There's no other way to look at that. So it's time for people to bring out your pure motives, the people that claim to represent God, even the Watchtower operative that have been hired. Have some humanity in you, whether you're an atheist, agnostic, or whatever. You will have to look at yourself in the mirror one day, as you do every day. You don't have to keep being controlled by fear. You are powerful. It's time for you to wake up. It's time for you to realize people are being harmed. Just like you would see a baby being beat and have humanity in you to see that that's not right. Everybody was once babies. Everybody wants truth and wants to not be taken advantage of. And it's time for you to look at what's true and stop saying everything is a lie when you don't let it be challenged. You know that that's not how reality works. And people are living in these false realities, wasting the precious gift of life, this phenomenon that we all experience that is not by accident. You have your own thumbprint, your own DNA. The chances of you being here is astronomically high because God handpicked you. And how dare anybody on here that claims to be a Christian or whatever spiritual background you have, and you don't have humanity in you to see when people are being mistreated. So it's now time for you to realize that we all can learn from each other. That people are being separated and torn apart from their families. People are growing old and lonely, never having kids, waiting for something that's out of hope that could be true, but there's more evidence that it's not true because it's opposing what the Bible actually teaches. You have people that are dying from medical procedures by not having the proper hermeneutics of a scripture. As an example, when you look at this nutrition label, when you look at it's giving you the serving sizes, and most people just look at the serving sizes or the serving size, and they'll look at that whole package and think it's just 60 calories. I've seen it time and time again. But they're not looking at the service side. This is how hermeneutics work. So it's not just the serving size for 60 calories, how much fat is in that serving, how much protein, how much carbs, and then you have to add up the actual serving sizes. So if it's 3 servings, as an example, there'll be 180 calories, not 60. So that's what's happening with scriptures. We're not looking at the who, what, when, where, how, and why of matters. And then the audience it was written to. How would they have perceived it? What was their thought process? What was the setting? What did those words mean, the etymology of those original languages? All of that is important. If you're searching for truth, you would do that. Because just like somebody would think that this whole box of crackers is only 60 calories. I've seen it happen, and now they're gaining weight and they don't know why. There's levels to our thinking. We have to keep elevating ourselves. Truth does not run away from a lie, but a lie always runs away from the truth. And it's just that simple. So I am speaking to you from a motivational and inspirational standpoint, that you need to become aware of the information that you're putting into your mind, that you have this ability to turn off this paradigm of falsities and turn on the paradigm of truth, to always have self-awareness, always lead with what you don't know, and to go into something to learn, not to condemn. True learning doesn't need to be condemned. True learning exposes what isn't true and is condemned in itself. Something that's already condemned that's false will always lead to bad results because you reap what you sow. But you have to understand when somebody may have planted a good seed, but somebody keeps uprooting it and putting it in the bad soil. And that's how we are. You are a good seed. Get out of trying to grow your goodness in an environment of lies. Not that other people don't have lies, but outright deception. Sometimes people aren't aware of their lies. But when somebody is knowingly deceiving you, it's never from God. God doesn't hide things. He openly exposes everything. He doesn't put laws and principles in place that harm people. And then he has to constantly hire lawyers, as an example, where his whole purpose is to defend his name, his universal sovereignty, not to defame it. So be fair, be honest, use your brain. The realities are harmful, but you can overcome. You are great, and you stand up for truth, and you speak it, and you don't hide. You don't hide like the enemy. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You stand up to a 2x2, an active Watchtower member, anybody, and you hold your chest out and you look them straight in the eye. You tell them the truth, and all the name calling does not matter. Because just like it took some years to end slavery, and just like it took some years for equal rights in various parts of the world to happen, and people wanted people to be silent, if they had not spoken up, it would have never happened. Some of you right now are benefiting from that, not realizing that came from good people, brave people speaking up so that you can even have the right to go knock on somebody's door, so that you can even have the right to disagree as a woman or as a man. All of that came from doing the right thing, even in the face of danger, criticism, and being misunderstood. Here's the difference between doing what's right according to objective reality versus subjectivity that leads you down the wrong path. What's objective stands the test of time. What's objective is true, and you feel it in your bones. What's objective gives you courage, because just like I know that squats works on my legs, and somebody may think it works on their chest. I don't need to debate that. I know that, not just from head knowledge. I've experienced it. Somebody can tell me all day that push-ups work on your legs. Keep doing it, and I guarantee you won't build your leg muscles. And that is the difference. And that's why former people, especially ones that remain Christian, that have done their research, can speak with confidence, and they don't have the fear. They can experience Philippians 4:7 and Ephesians 3:19. God has given them the peace that surpasses all knowledge. No devil, no lie, no confusion, no fear of something that's not in God's holy word can take away the real truth, because God has filtered through their heart with the Holy Spirit and given them what they need to have confidence. Because when you rest your faith in God and not man, you have peace. And it's just that simple. So like, subscribe, comment, and share my content. And I look forward to speaking with you more on various topics that may enter my mind. Have a good day. Thank you.